Ladies and gentlemen, Fright Night Theater.
You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties.
Join us.
Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era, improv new stories based on old stories, except when we come up with our own stories. But let's face it, there aren't really any more original stories, so we keep falling back on classic stories to imagine how we might improve our favorite movies, TV shows, and games. I'm Mike.
I'm Josh.
And we were raised by rentals. Josh, it's time for part 2 of our spooky season switcheroo.
Woohoo! But, speaking of switcheroos, I think you're reading my script.
Yeah, I think I might have been. I got my notes mixed up here.
Maybe you were confused because you didn't record the Boogeyman's Closet for so long that you were, like, getting the itch to be the podcast host. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a while. But it'll be back before this episode comes out. So, aha!
Aha, see? More switcheroos.
Indeed.
But yes, we are here, and we are back for part 2 of our Spooky Season Switcheroo 2-part series, which we started with our last episode, Curse of the Mannequin. And then that episode, we took a comedy movie from the VHS era, and we tried to transform it into a horror movie. So the topic for this episode would be the opposite of that. We're going to take a horror movie and turn it into a comedy.
Indeed. Although with this one, I don't know how much of a comedy it will be. It'll be mostly a comedy with very bad things happening.
Well, sometimes those are the best comedies, right? It's spooky season, so it should be a dark comedy, you know?
True. I agree.
And with Curse of the Mannequin, even though we turned it into a horror movie, I think if that movie were real, there would still be like a lot of good jokes in there. I mean, Hollywood's in the movie, right? So it's got to be at least a little bit. That was a wild episode, by the way. I did not imagine that would turn out as well as it did. And I know we say that on a lot of episodes, but sometimes we just say, fuck it. And we pick an idea and we cross our fingers and we hope it works, and we just we jump out of the plane and, mix more metaphors and just go for it. And I think by the time we got to the recording, it was like, oh, shit, I know what we should do.
Yeah, no, I'll agree, because leading up to the actual day, I just had like a nugget of an idea, and it wasn't until we started talking that things started falling into place. The whole time I was like, well, spin the fucking wheel. Let's see where this goes.
Right? And it worked out really well. And I'm really glad that we got Mannequin in the podcast series, because I'm sure that there are listeners, and I'm thinking of a few specific ones. There are listeners out there who have the same taste in ridiculous 80s and 90s movies that we do, and probably I do, because I watch a lot of stuff that isn't horror. And this was one of those movies, as I mentioned in the last episode, where for whatever reason, I would just watch this all the time as a kid. I had it taped off of HBO or something, and it was just in my my library of VHS tapes where we would squeeze 3 movies onto one. And it was just in regular rotation all the time. I thought it was great. It's still my number one Andrew McCarthy movie, one of my favorite Brat Pack movies, or Brat Pack adjacent. But it's absolutely fucking stupid. Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely. It is a dumb movie.
Yeah, Mannequin is ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in all of the best ways. And I think because of that, we were able to tell a really fun story by taking something ridiculous that was already in the movie that barely fit into the rest of it, which was the ancient Egyptian angle. And we just leaned really hard into that.
The part that I completely forgot was in the movie until you had mentioned it. I was like, wait, what? There's Egyptian shit? What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that movie is just bonkers, right? But the movie we're going to talk about today is not as bonkers, and it's definitely as much of a classic in the sense that it's sort of a B-movie classic of the era. But unlike Mannequin, this is not a movie that I've seen a crap load of times. In fact, before this week, I don't think I'd seen this in decades. This was a movie I saw as a kid. It was a classic of the 80s, but I haven't seen Fright Night in 20 years.
See, whereas I just went to go see it at the drive-in this summer. It was a double feature of Fright Night and The Burbs. And it was a fantastic double feature, and seeing both on the big screen, which are two movies I have seen at least 24 times easily. Fright Night I've easily seen over 20 times in my life. The Burbs probably close as much, mainly because it's one of Jessica's favorite movies, so she puts it on frequently. So I often will walk through the living room and it's like, oh, The Burbs is on. I'll sit down and watch this. It's kind of like me with RoboCop when I'm flicking the channels and RoboCop's on. It's like, well, I'm watching RoboCop.
Yep. The remote down movies.
Exactly. And The Burbs definitely is one of those. But yeah, Fright Night, I fucking love this movie. Always have, always will. It's one of the few films that I can genuinely say I like every movie in the franchise, including the little known, little talked about Fright Night 2 remake, which has nothing to do with the Fright Night 1 remake, nor does it actually remake Fright Night 2 from the early 90s or late 80s. I can't remember when that came out, if it was 89 or 91. But anyway, regardless.
Fright Night 2, 1988. I have it in my notes.
Oh, 88. Okay, I was off. Oh, yeah, because this one was 85. That's right. So, the Fright Night 2 remake is just a fun vampire flick. Like, it's silly, it's kind of ridiculous, it's low budget, it's a bunch of no-name actors, but it's a solid flick. So I can go on record and say that all 4 Fright Night movies in existence are a shitload of fun. But this is clearly the most fun. I mean, the original is fantastic, and we discussed this off the air, but we didn't plan this. We had originally, when we came up with the spooky season switcheroo, it was like you said, take a comedy and make it a horror, and take a horror and make it a comedy. Simple as that. One of the first things I had thrown out was Fright Night, without realizing the connection that William Ragsdale has to the Mannequin franchise as the star of Mannequin 2.
On the move.
Yes. Right. And the fact that, was it Christy Swanson that was the mannequin in part 2?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So another vampire connection, just saying.
Yeah, that's perfect. In fact, and this is a hot take, but I think Christy Swanson is the superior Buffy.
I can't follow you there, but that's only because I fucking love the TV show. However, I absolutely love that movie. That is a movie I've gone back and watched, even like in the last 5 years. And yeah, there's some jokes that don't land in 2024. Like there's a couple that are like, all right, that's a little cringy. But overall, that movie is fucking hilarious. And oh god, Pee Wee Herman was so damn good in it. Paul Rubens just kills that role as the vampire assistant. I love it.
Absolutely. He fucking makes that movie. Yeah, I absolutely love that movie. I loved it when it first came out. I didn't see it in the theater, but I saw it very quickly after it was on home video. And I remember not wanting to watch the TV show when it first came out, because it was in that my teenage years when you have a lot of opinions about stuff, and so when I heard that there was making a TV show out of the movie, I was like, what the hell? They're making another stupid TV show out of a great movie? Like, they tried that with Weird Science and it didn't work, and I just thought the whole concept of the TV show was fucking stupid, and I didn't watch it forever.
See, yeah. I had the exact opposite, because I actually liked the Weird Science TV show, even though when it first came out, I was like, they're making a Weird Science TV show? This isn't how the movie was. And then by the 3rd episode, I was like, I kind of like this show. Whereas with Buffy, I very much like you. I saw it in the theater. I actually saw it at the Four Seasons, which I'm sure many Niagara Falls people will remember the Four Seasons. I miss that theater so much.
Four Seasons, R.I.P.
Oh, such a good theater. But yeah, I saw it there the summer it came out. And then when the TV show came out, I remember I had no desire to watch it because I saw the commercials and I was like, it looks dumb. My sister was the one who wanted to see it, and she had to work the night of the premiere. So she's like, please tape it, please tape it. And I mean, I'm sure you remember this back in the 80s and 90s. Oh, you got to tape the TV show, and then you try to cut out the commercials. So you actually watch it and then pause it. And then, so it was one of those things where I was watching the show to make sure the recording was fine. And I ended up digging the first episode. I'm like, this shouldn't be as fun as it is. Like, I really liked Xander and Willow. That's what drew me in. And then I kept watching it with my sister week after week. And before I knew it, I was hooked. And it wasn't because of Buffy. It was because my 3 favorite characters were Giles, Willow, and Xander.
Yeah, I don't even remember the show that much, to be honest. Again, this is sort of one of my like hot takes, in the sense that, you know, we do like a pop culture podcast. All of my friends are really into, you know, genre stuff in general, and being like a Gen X / millennial, like, you know, you grow up with stuff like, you know, Buffy and South Park, and, you know, music like, you know, I mentioned Marilyn Manson. I'm mentioning these examples because these are all examples of stuff that like I just never got into. Like I appreciate South Park, and like I liked the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV shows that I saw, but I just never got into it. Like I never like jumped on the bandwagon for some of these like monolith like properties that like dominated. I feel the same way about like the Sandman comic book. Like, yeah, I like it. I like Neil Gaiman as a writer. I think his novels are head and shoulders above his comic book work, but like I get it. I understand why people like it. You know, I tend to like the spin-offs more than the main series. Like Death, the High Cost of Living is one of my favorites from that era. But yeah, it's just I never got into the Buffy TV show for some reason. But holy crap, I go back and watch that movie, you know, maybe every couple of years, and it's like brand new every time, and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's the thing about being just generalized pop culture fans is there's always going to be those pop culture zeitgeists that you just kind of don't get hooked on. Like I know for me, the two that like I always hear, actually three that I always heard about over like the last 20 years that just never clicked with me. One I know that you love is The Office. I just never really watched it. Nothing against it. You know, what I've seen of it, I think is funny. I just never sat down and watched it. And then the two that I did try to sit down and watch and didn't end up liking that so many other people liked were Heroes and Lost. Now, again, nothing against either of those shows. It was just they didn't grab my attention. Like I understand why people liked them, but it wasn't for me. So I mean, that's going to happen throughout pop culture.
Yeah, and like those are funny examples because I never liked Heroes either. I never understood the hype. I didn't get. I even read the comics that they based on the show, which were supposedly also good, and I didn't care for them. And Lost is a weird one for me because I watched it like from its premiere episode. I watched it all the way through. Even though it's been out for a really long time, like the first episode is more than 20 years old at this point, but it was actually one of the last shows that Christina, my wife, and I watched like every episode as it came out, like together, because now everything's on streaming, so we're always watching like separate stuff. But I liked the first couple of seasons for the story, but thought it was super corny and like badly written, but I just thought the story was interesting. But then I liked the second half of it because the writing was so good, except the fact that the story made no sense. Like in the sense that like I loved the characters, but did not give a shit about what they were doing, you know? Whereas like in the first half, I was so interested in like the mystery and what's going on and what the plot is, but I hated every single character on the show. And every time they would do one of those episodes where they would have like a, you know, they had like a character centric episode, they would do all the flashbacks and that one character would like, you know, dominate the episode and they would get their spotlight. I was like, oh my God, like shoot me. I'm so fucking bored. Like get back to like the smoke monster and the polar bears, you know?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of TV shows that I feel like they overstay their welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the risk of going on and on and on,
right.
It's funny because we're here to talk about Fright Night. I promise we'll get back to it, but it's funny going back to that mentality of like, you know, being young and having like a lot of opinions, and a lot of it is like, well, you know, I'm not going to like that because of X, like, oh, it's a remake, so it's got to suck, or it's based on a TV show, so it's going to suck, or it's got that stupid actor from those like teen movies, that's going to suck, you know, and like you like prejudge all this stuff because, you know, you have some predisposed opinion about the actor or, you know, the type of movie it is or whatever. And that's how I felt about the Harry Potter movies and the books in general.
Same.
I could not stand the idea of the books, and I was so angry when the movies came out, like, you know, in my like suburban white boy anger over like a movie based on a book that was for children. But I remember being so mad because I was like, I can't believe that people don't realize that J.K. Rowling is completely ripping off the Books of Magic by Neil Gaiman. Like, it's the same fucking story. There's like a young kid with like round glasses and like tousled hair, and like some wizard comes and tells him that he's like secretly a powerful wizard who's gonna like save the world, and he has a white owl and he goes to like a wizard academy. I'm like, how do you not see that she's just stealing from Neil Gaiman? until I finally watched the first movie one day at work when I used to work in an environment, like a residential environment, and people living there were watching the movie. And I kept spying it out of the corner of my eye, and eventually like sat down and watched the second half of it. And I was like, oh, this is so cute and fun. And then I went and got the books, and I'm like, I don't know why I was so angry. Like, these are fun.
I actually remember that, because I remember I had the exact same thing, because I working at Media Play, like I remember some of the Midnight Madness sales for the Harry Potter books. So I had a predisposed hatred of Harry Potter fans, because, you know, anyone who's ever worked in retail for like a big release that is a fan-centric release, you're going to encounter some strange cats that don't have the best social bearings.
Yeah.
Who are going to get loud and obnoxious and maybe even really rude to you. And that was my experience with Harry Potter. So I was like, F this franchise. I want nothing to do with it. But at the time that the movie came out, that was the brief window. It was about a year where I was working every Wednesday instead of every Friday. So I had every Friday off. I still worked every Saturday and Sunday, but every Friday night, Jess and I would just go see a movie. Didn't matter what it was. We would just go see a movie. That was just our Friday night thing. We'd go grab a bite to eat. We'd go see a movie. And there wasn't much out, but the new Harry Potter movie was out, the first one. And, you know, she was like, well, why don't we go see that? And I was like, fucking Harry Potter. I don't want to see that garbage. And she's like, oh, come on. It looks cute. And I was like, all right. So we went to go see it, and I fucking fell in love. I was like, wow, I completely judged this wrong. Because I've said this before on many different shows, my favorite type of fantasy isn't high fantasy. My favorite type of fantasy is Stranger in a Strange Land. When you take a normal person and put them in this bizarre setting, and they have to acclimate to the new world that they've discovered that they were blind to before. And that's exactly what Harry Potter is. It's this boy who knows nothing about the magical world, and he gets thrust into it, and now he has to, you know, learn this whole new world. And I find that fascinating. So I loved the movie, but I had no desire to read the books. And I remember telling you about it, and you were like, fuck Harry Potter. Oh, that's stupid. Yeah. And then my sister found out that I liked the first movie so much. So for Christmas, she bought me the first 3 books as like a box set. And I was like, oh, thanks, because I had no desire to read them. And then working overnights, you know, you run out of things to read eventually. So I was like, well, shit, I got to read something. I got no comics. I got no books. So I grabbed the first book out of the box set, started reading it about an hour into work, finished it like 2 hours later, and was jonesing to read the next book, but it was sitting back in my apartment. So I was like, damn it, I can't start until tomorrow. But yeah, I became hooked. But I do remember talking to you about this. And actually, this is going to sound very weird for the listeners, but it's a very specific memory. I remember you and I had gone to the Eastern Hills Mall to meet up with Jess when she worked at York Photo, and we were walking around just like killing time waiting for her to get off of work. And we ended up over in, I think it was Walden Books, and we started talking about Harry Potter because it was in the window. And you had gone off on this tirade about the books of magic and made me second guess, like, should I really like this much? Because it really is a ripoff. Holy shit.
And what's funny is I was so angry for so long. I was in my 20s at that point, but yeah, it's sort of like this teenage ire that you have where you want to categorize everything in the world into, like, you know, black and white and good and bad. And, you know, all this mention of like Neil Gaiman and J.K. Rowling, you know, makes me think back to the Tainted Love episode that we did a little while ago about like cancel culture and all that. So, you know, definitely go back and listen to that, you know, for more on the context there. But yeah, the second movie was already out on like TV or HBO or whatever home video. Like, I saw the second movie the next night at work, and so I saw the first 2 movies basically back to back on home video, which means whatever year that was, they were out long enough that the books were out long enough for there to be 2 movies before I finally watched one of them. And was like, shit, like I've been missing out this whole time, like I gotta catch up. Fuck, you know.
Yep.
And what's really stupid is that while I was so indignant about somebody ripping off the books of magic with Tim Hunter, which even sounds like Harry Potter, but I was so indignant about that, except that I don't even like the books of magic comic. In fact, I downright fucking hate it. I think it's Neil Gaiman's worst comic. It is so painful to read. It is awful. And so like I don't even know why I like defend it so much.
Well, that's like the horror fans out there that are like, she ripped off Troll, because if you watch Troll, the main character is, a boy named Harry Potter. And in the trailer, he's like, my name's Harry Potter and I'm a wizard. And he's a little kid with glasses and black hair. And people are like, she ripped him off.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, but she improved it because, come on, Troll.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, that movie is so bad. I mean, Troll's only legacy is the sequel. Like, let's be honest here. And the sequel is only famous because it's like one of the worst movies ever made.
Yes, it's notorious, not like good.
Right. That's really the only reason anyone remembers Troll 1.
Oh, man. But this is funny. This brings us back to what we're supposed to be here talking about, which is, Fright Night. So how about let's go back and let's rip off Fright Night by just changing everything about it.
Well, to be fair, like you definitely bringing up the whole like teen angst, like big opinion thing that makes sense to Charlie. Charlie's character is a very opinionated person. So, it kind of works.
And absolutely. And, we're 81 episodes in, so I'm not going to apologize for the rabbit trails anymore. If people have been listening to us for this long, then they probably, I hope, enjoy these sort of like rants that we go on the side. So, yeah.
We should probably talk a little bit about the actual movie before we change the movie. But I don't know, like I have a bunch of notes here about things I actually like from the original, like a lot. Because this really is one of my favorite vampire movies, like easily in my top 10 favorite vampire flicks of all time. This and From Dusk Till Dawn are probably my two most watched vampire flicks. Because vampire movies, for the most part, to me at least, are usually slow burns. You have like Bram Stoker's Dracula, fantastic movie, but it's a slow burn. The original Dracula, again, fantastic movie, slow burn. I'm looking very much forward to the remake of Nosferatu. There's a lot of really good vampire flicks out there, like the original Salem's Lot. I haven't watched the new HBO one. I watched the 2000s remake and was not impressed. But the original, fucking Barlow is one of the most terrifying vampires I've ever seen on film. But this is the one I come back to over and over and over again. It's like comfort food. I fucking love this movie. And I put it squarely on the shoulders of Roddy McDowall and Chris Sarandon, because the two of them chew every fucking scene they are in. Like they are the reason to watch this movie. Not discrediting William Ragsdale, because he was fantastic as well. I forget the chick who plays Amy, Marcy from Married with Children. She is a whole nother story.
Yeah, Amanda Pierce.
Yes, I have many notes that Amy sucks. But
yeah,
I fucking love Roddy McDowall and Chris Sarandon in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely make the movie, especially Chris Sarandon. And he's an actor who, while I love him in other things like The Princess Bride, I don't know that I ever would have suspected him to be the type of actor who would just own a movie and a role in the way that he did. And I haven't seen this in so long that I was like kind of surprised by it. But yeah, so before we get into like the plot and all that, like let's stop and do like some facts and figures, and we won't run through the whole gamut of like the IMDb facts and all that. In fact, if people are interested, go back into the Boogeyman's Closet podcast archives, episode 83, because you did an episode about this with your co-hosts Maurice, Dawn, and Josh Hibbard, aka Professor Pickman. So I just listened to that today, and it's hilarious. Really long, but hilarious.
That was notoriously one of our long episodes. That was one of the ones where we had so many issues with sound. It took me like 11 hours to edit. Like I hated that episode when I was done, but I'm glad that the episode, got out there.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I had that problem with Bad Rubbish that came out like a couple of episodes ago. Like, oh my God, it took me so long to edit that, and because we had so many issues with sound and like mistakes and having to take breaks and interruptions, and it was I cut out like 20 minutes, and it was like 1 second at a time, like 1 second here, 2 seconds there. It was horrible. My favorite vampire movie is The Lost Boys. And it's probably my favorite vampire story, period, because I'm really not a huge fan of vampire fiction in general. Not that it's bad. There's some great stuff. Like I love Interview with the Vampire. There's this really great children's book called My Best Friend's a Vampire. And then unrelated, really fun teen comedy with the same title. That's really fun. Yep. But there's just something about vampires as like a monster, like it's a classic monster like werewolves and stuff, I was just never interested in it. But ironically, and I'll save this for our upcoming Super Gushers episode, it's really ironic that I'm not that interested in vampires because of a story that I'm going to tell about my Halloween experience as a kid. So I'll leave that hook in this episode so you guys check out our Super Gushers that's coming up. But yes, Fright Night, 1985. Yes, there are some other movies in the franchise. I have not seen any of them. I never saw Fright Night 2. I never knew it existed. I heard about the remake. It looked good, but I hadn't seen the original in so long that I remember when I saw the remake and I thought, damn, like this cast is amazing. I want to see that, but hey, I should go back and watch the original one first to remind myself. And then I just never did that. So, it's been 13 years and I never saw the remake, which came out in 2011. And I didn't realize there was a part 2 to the remake. And you guys mentioned on your Boogeyman's Closet episode that there's like some Bollywood ripoffs too, but I haven't seen any of them.
I would highly recommend at least the original sequel, because Fright Night 2 is a lot of fun. Like they play up the camp. It's Dandridge's sister. She wants to know what happened to her brother. So now it's Charley in college, and like she comes to town with like her little vampire party, her little soiree. And there's like a werewolf. There's like a Renfield type character who's eating bugs, and it's Muscle Cheeks, by the way. Muscle Cheeks is a Renfield character.
I cannot see that. I cannot picture him.
Dude, he kills it. It's so good. And the dude who plays the fucking werewolf in Monster Squad is the werewolf in Fright Night. It's fantastic. It's a really fun flick. Plays up the camp. Like this one, like I said, it gets its toe to the line of like over the top. The second one definitely goes over the top in several moments, but it's funny. It's a lot of fun, but it's notoriously hard to find. I don't know if it's a rights issue or what, but it's almost never available on streaming. And when it is streaming, it's streaming for a very limited window. So that's one of the reasons where it's like, don't get rid of your physical media, kids. I still have my copy of the DVD, and the DVD is hard to find. But the sequel to the remake, which it's funny because it's one of those things where it's like, why did they even call it Fright Night 2? Because it's not a remake of the sequel, and it's not technically a sequel to the remake. It just is Fright Night 2. It's also a very good story, but they don't play up the camp at all. They just try to tell you a straight up vampire story, and it's fun. It's a fun movie. But if you're going to watch any of them, I would recommend the original Fright Night 2. Not that the remake is bad in any way. The remake is a lot of fun. It drops the ball in a couple moments. We actually covered that on the Boogeyman's Closet as well, the 2011 remake. And like there's a few moments where it's like, that's not as fun, but it's still a really solid flick.
Yeah, I'll probably definitely check out Fright Night 2 just from the cast, just from you mentioning it. And I didn't even bother to Google that because we're already belaboring the point, and I know you said you had a lot of notes. I've got some notes, and I had to stop myself because I'm like, again, just go back and listen to the Boogeyman's Closet like I did. It's all right there. But yeah, I'll definitely. I want to check it out now, and I've spent so much time with these characters just today, watching the movie again and then listening to the podcast. It's like, I probably should watch it soon while I'm still like in the world,
Right.
But yeah, so this was directed by Tom Holland, who is famous for Child's Play, probably most famous for Child's Play, and I think Psycho 2 is a good movie.
I fucking love Psycho 2.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if people are on board with Psycho 2 in general as a good movie, but I think it's an example of a sequel that people didn't think should exist, but it's great.
100% agree. 100%. I actually like the whole Psycho franchise, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did a great job with taking something that should have been this like very singular art piece and then like turning it into a franchise, and everyone was mad about it. But it's like, yeah, but they kind of nailed it. It's good.
They really did.
Charley Brewster is the main character. Charlie, played by William Ragsdale, who, as Dawn mentioned on your episode of the Boogeyman's Closet, was the star of Herman's Head, which was a fucking amazing show in the 90s.
Loved that show.
Love that show. Jerry Dandridge, we mentioned, played by Chris Sarandon, who is Prince Humperdinck from The Princess Bride, also in Child's Play, and the voice of Jack Skellington, not the singing voice, as Josh Hibbard pointed out. We all know that's Danny Elfman. But yeah, he steals this whole movie. This is a Chris Sarandon like starring vehicle. So much so that like Williams Ragsdale's character of Charlie, in my opinion, is so annoying that I never wanted him on screen. And every time he was there, I was like, oh, get back to fucking Jerry Dandridge, ball.
Right?
Roddy McDowall plays Peter Vincent, who is like a horror TV show host who used to be an actor who played in like, B horror movies like The Character. And the real Roddy McDowall was in Planet of the Apes and Cleopatra, The Poseidon Adventure. But he's got this whole long storied career of, stage and film and TV. And, he's just a classic.
This is something you used to see a lot in horror movies, especially from the 80s, 70s and 80s. You would see this type of thing where they would get like a bunch of newcomers, a bunch of like, modern actors. And then you'd get that one actor that has this storied career that might be on the downslope of their career. And then we're going to put them in one of these movies. That's how you get Donald Pleasance in as Dr. Loomis in Halloween. It's how you get in Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy's dad. Was it John Saxon? And then you have Betsy Palmer for Pamela Voorhees. Like, this is how you get those types of actors is you have like these actors who have this storied career and you put them in a slasher movie in the 80s or a monster flick in the 80s. And it gives it gives a gravitas to the film. Like it brings a little bit of class to this underwhelming idea, especially because in the 80s horror, while well loved, was also seen as trash cinema. So if you had this like highbrow actor in it, it would make people take a second look. So I know that was done on purpose back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the reason why you get Alec Guinness in Star Wars, who was famously there for a paycheck,
Yep.
Yes, and as you mentioned, Amanda Bierce plays Amy. Amy sucks. Amanda Bierce's character, Marcy, on Married with Children sucks. I don't know if Amanda herself sucks. I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she played shitty characters.
100% agree. I could not stand her on Married with Children. And in this, okay, just right off the bat, we'll get into our notes on the film, but right off the bat, like, she angers me in the very first scene, and then she pisses me off in almost every scene following that.
Absolutely. But what's funny, and we'll talk about it, but Charlie and Amy and their friend Evil Ed, played by Stephen Jeffrey Miller, who basically wasn't in anything, but the three of them play these like teenage characters. And I feel like the only note they must have been given from Tom Holland as a director or from their acting advisor, whoever, the only note they had was overreact to everything in the most obnoxious way.
Yeah. It almost feels like they're kids in the 80s trying to pretend to be kids in the 50s on a sitcom like Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, except that they're like 20-year-olds pretending to be high school students in the 80s, pretending to be high school students in the 50s.
It's so weird.
Yeah, I couldn't stand the three of them on screen. Again, they're just obnoxious. But at the same time, I love it when a fictional character like evokes that type of reaction. So it doesn't take away my enjoyment of the movie. I think the movie is phenomenal. I wish I would have seen it over the last couple of decades because I had a great time watching it. And I think it's a good thing when a movie makes you feel like some kind of a way about a character, whether it's like a character that you like love to hate or the hate that you love, or just a character like these characters who are just so ridiculous because they're become memorable. It's not just some background character that you forget about or that you forget is even in the movie. Like the next character, Billy Cole, played by Jonathan Stark, who as soon as he came on screen, I'm like, oh yeah, there was another guy.
Yep. I know Dawn, I know you love Billy, but I gotta be honest, like he's one of those characters I kind of always forget about until I start watching it again. Like, oh yeah, his roommate. Like,
yeah, exactly. Although that guy was in House 2, The Second Story, which, again, as you also mentioned on The Boogeyman's Closet, is an absolutely phenomenal movie. And it's another one of those movies that I had taped off a TV, and I would watch it constantly as a kid.
I freaking love that movie. Like, does it make sense to the first movie? Not at all. Is it even a horror movie? Not really. But damn, is it fun.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I liked about it so much is that some things in House 2, The Second Story, are scary as shit. Like, what's his name? Slim Reeser or whatever the evil cowboy guy's name is.
Oh,
like,
that guy was terrifying.
God damn, like as a little kid, that was like nightmare fuel for me. Like literally had nightmares. But then at the same time, the rest of the movie is so goofy and it's silly. It's actually like a perfect kind of horror movie for kids because it is so goofy and it kind of saves the scary parts for just certain aspects. Like kind of like why I like The Gate so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I never even saw the first House as a kid. I didn't see that till I was an adult because there was no reason to. Like House 2 is a whole story in and of itself, and I don't know. I never had any desire to go find the first one, but I will say, holy crap, those are amazing like movie posters or like the VHS box art, scary
Oh
as shit.
yeah. I will say House 1 terrified me as a kid. I saw it very young, and it scared the shit out of me. As an adult watching it, like, man, you see all the cracks in the makeup and you see like all the mistakes, but it's still a really fun movie. House 2 as a kid, I absolutely loved it. Never saw the third one or the fourth one until I was an adult. And they're nothing to write home about at all. House 1 and 2 though, good times.
Yeah. I never saw any of the other ones because I'm the kind of person when it comes to movies that I don't tend to like need to follow the franchise all the way through. Like I'm perfectly happy with just seeing one or two movies, and sometimes I don't want to see the sequels because like it doesn't look that good, and I kind of don't want to ruin like this good thing that I've got going on with like T2 or like RoboCop 2.
Yep.
It's like, do I want to watch more of these? Like I don't know. Whereas I'm the total opposite when it comes to comic book series, where like I get obsessive about once I find a series that I like, if there's a lot of it or if it's been going on for years, I have to go back to the very beginning and like read the whole thing and all the spin-offs and the crossovers and everything, and I get obsessive about it. So let's get into it. We went through the cast. We've mentioned a little bit about kind of what it's about. It's obviously a vampire movie, but because I haven't seen it that often, you've seen it a bunch of times. Mike, give us a quick recap of like, what's this about?
Well, basically, the simplest explanation is that Charlie is a horror-obsessed teen, which, it's questionable. We'll get back to that for a second. But horror-obsessed teen, and neighbors move in next door to the house that's been abandoned for a while. He sees them bringing in a coffin on night one and immediately thinks something is up. As the days go on, he continues to think maybe his neighbor is a vampire for reasons, and turns out he's right. Dude's a vampire, and then he finds out that Charlie knows he's a vampire, so now he's got to kill Charlie and his friends. So it's basically Charlie versus the vampire next door.
Yeah, that's a perfectly like succinct way of putting it. I would have described it as The Burbs with a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, the Burbs before the Burbs with a vampire.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the Burbs earlier, like, and you're right, that would have been a perfect like double feature, to see the Burbs and Fright Night together, because they're very similar premise. The main difference is that in Fright Night, you find out like the truth pretty early on. You find out almost immediately that Charlie's right. Yeah, that Jerry Dandridge actually is a vampire, and then Charlie spends the rest of the movie very loudly trying to convince everybody in his life that he's not crazy, that there really is a vampire. And honestly, like, I think the evidence is pretty obvious to everybody else too, but like nobody wants to believe it because, I mean, vampires are real,
Exactly. And see, that is the thing I like to see in a vampire movie is like the reason that people don't believe is because it's that whole like what's the saying that the greatest trick the devil pulled on the world is making the world think he doesn't exist. It's that idea is that even though it's like you have this thing that's like, look, all the evidence is stacking up against this person being a vampire, but they're not real. Come on. Like, I love it when that's the reason that people don't believe is just because how can it be real and ignore the evidence in front of you?
Yeah, exactly. And the whole time Charlie is just like, how can you not see it? Like, what is going on? Like, you must be like, are you blind? And it's just, he gets like shriller as the movie goes on,
Oh God, so fucking annoying. And you're right. All three of the kids are fucking annoying in this movie.
Yeah, they really are. What ironically, I actually like Charlie's mom, and I didn't write down who the actress was, but I like her character a lot, actually. I wish that she had been in the movie more.
She's got great comedic timing.
She really does. And whoever wrote her script is a great writer. I guess Tom Holland probably wrote the script to this, right?
I believe so.
Every line she says is this perfect little bullet of like plot exposition that you need for either explaining what's going on or like developing personality. It's like she doesn't have these like long monologues or these diatribes like Charlie goes on, and she's not really involved in scenes with a lot of other characters. So it's like everything that she says is boiled down to exactly the thing that she needs to say to like make the scene work.
Yep.
And I it's just like go back and watch it again and like pay attention to that. I was really, really impressed by like just how clean those scenes were. But then the rest of the movie is not like that at all, because no. my criticism of the rest of the movie is, holy shit, like this just keeps going on and on.
I will say in the remake, Mom has a much bigger role and she's a really fun character.
That's good. People must have the same criticism about us. These guys just keep going on and on. Get to the fucking point already. Jesus Christ.
This is true. We haven't even gotten to the improv. Just a couple of quick things. Like, so one of the things I never truly noticed, like I always kind of noticed, but it didn't click until this viewing, is when Charlie is watching Billy and Jerry bring the coffin into the house next door. I never noticed that Jerry is literally holding it with one hand.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, so of course Charlie's going to be like, the hell? Like, not only is it a coffin, but how the fuck is the one dude struggling and the other dude is just like holding it with one fucking hand? So it's like, that's just one of those things that never really clicked for me. Amy, I got to bitch about Amy for a minute. First of all, like I get it when you're teenagers and you're kind of, hemming and hawing about whether or not you're going to do something sexually. That's not the part that upsets me. The part that upsets me is when Charlie looks away for a minute, she's just like, fuck you, you bastard. And then it's just like hating on him for the next day. Like the next day she sees him in the diner, or a couple days later, or whatever. And he's like concerned because there was a murder of a woman who he saw go into the house that's right next door to him. And she's just like, how dare you be concerned about that? I'm going to grab this other guy's food and rub it in your face and ruin two people's days. Like, fuck you, lady. Like, she just, every time I see her, she pisses me off. Just terrible character.
It's that like overreacting that she does. Yeah. And like her and Charlie's story starts with, they're getting a little hot and heavy. Charlie's trying to like take it to the next level, and she's, saying no. And, of course, in a movie today, it would be, well, yeah, of course, like she can put her boundary up anywhere she wants and like stop him. It doesn't matter. Like they were having fun. Like you don't have to, take it to the bedroom or in their case, from the floor to the bed. But,
right.
And Charlie sucks for like kind of pressuring her. But at the same time, it's like they're teenagers. Like, we've all been in situations, where you're getting kind of like, oh, like, what are we doing here? Like, this is frustrating. And like, I get it. And, of course it was a movie of the 80s, but it's weird how she just immediately goes, oh, wait, hang on a second. We're supposed to have sex, right? This is like a teen horror movie in the 80s. Like, I'll be in bed, like, and it's like, wait, what? Like, she just turns on a dime.
But my thing was like that it was okay for her to say no, but the moment Charlie isn't interested, then he's the dick. It's like, wait a second. Well, hold up a second. You can't flip the script like that. If he's not interested too, that's also okay. Stop it.
I know. Exactly. And like, she should have been happy about that. Like, she was not wanting to go there, was feeling kind of pressured, and he was being a little bit of a jerk about it. And then as soon as she gives in and he's distracted, she should have been like, oh, thank God. I can keep my shirt on.
Exactly. But further proving she sucks is like when he goes to her, he's clearly upset. He's clearly seen some shit. He's telling her about two separate murders that have happened of women that he's seen go into the house next door. He's like, I got to do something. I need some help. I don't know what to do. And she's like, wait, is this an elaborate ruse to win me back? Like, everything isn't about you, Amy. Fuck off. Like,
exactly. Although I will say in her defense, it is incredibly annoying how often Charlie just ignores her completely. And there's an interesting like story arc where at the beginning of the movie, through the first couple of scenes, every time Charlie is getting distracted because he's seeing creepy things with his neighbor and like creepy stuff on the news that he's connecting to his neighbor, and Amy's talking to him and he's just completely ignoring her. Not even like, yeah, whatever, or asking her to be quiet.
Zoned out.
He doesn't respond at all. Watching Charlie, I was like, Charlie, would you just tell her to like hang on a second? Like, you're ignoring her, and it's like making her escalate her anger, which is already unreasonable, and it's making it worse because yes, it's annoying when you're trying to ask someone a question and you just get nothing. Just utter silence. You know, it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never does, and it's so frustrating.
I once trained a girl in my department who was like that. I would ask a question and she would just stare at me, and it was like, can you answer? And like it got to a point like I knew she wasn't going to be good for the job because like she's on the phone. Like my job is a phone job, and people would ask questions and she would nod. And I was like, you have to speak. They can't see you. It drove me nuts. But yes. So it's irritating when you're asking someone a question and they don't respond.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because the end of that story arc is by like the midpoint of the movie after Charlie has spent so many scenes trying to convince evil Ed, trying to convince Peter, trying to convince Amy, trying to convince his mom, trying to convince the cop, all these people that there's a vampire. You know, he says, he's like, haven't you been listening to anything I've been saying?
It's like, nope, and you haven't either, Charlie.
Exactly. Like, how about a little poetic justice, bitch?
Oh my God. But real quick, I want to just throw a few other things out here before we get into the actual improv. There's a couple things with Amy again, where she has one of the most annoying lines in the movie when they think Evil is pranking them later after, you know, when Jerry actually gets a hold of Evil, and he screams and Charlie's like, oh no, what was that? And she's like, it's just Evil messing around. She goes, cut it out, Evil. It's not funny. The way she says that, I mean, every time, like, I know it's coming, and every time it's like nails on a fucking chalkboard to me. It drives me nuts.
Oh, yeah. She was so perfectly cast as Marcy in Married with Children. It's like they were looking for an actress who could play the most annoying person they could find.
Yup. I also love the scene where Jerry gets invited over to their house. Because the whole thing, well, first, let me backtrack for a second. If Charlie is such a fucking horror nut and is so obsessed and is watching Peter Vincent movies all the time, which are mostly vampire fucking movies, why did he need to go to Evil to be like, tell me everything you know about vampires? And then Evil just told him some basic ass shit that's in every fucking vampire movie. Why didn't Charlie know that already?
Yes, exactly. He seems so like surprised, like he's gonna bust out a pen and start taking down notes. Oh, garlic, okay. Holy water, oh, that's interesting.
A cross, oh yeah, okay. Like, really, dude? You know. So, and then of course, you know, Evil. Obviously, we know story-wise why that scene is there, because we need exposition to tell the audience, hey, use these things, particularly the, hey, you're safe as long as the proper owner of the home doesn't invite him in. Like, that's something that is seen in a lot of vampire fiction, but it's not in like the top three. It's not like Stake Through the Heart, Sunlight, and Holy Objects. You know, a lot of people don't really, like, the average layperson isn't going to remember with vampires, oh, you have to invite him in. So I get it. I get why they did that scene, but it irked me with the characters, because it's like, couldn't Charlie have run down a list of like, okay, you know, cross it? Like, couldn't he just, there could have been another way to do it where it made sense to the character. But
yeah, I would have had Charlie just say something like, yeah, everyone knows that. Give me my $8 worth. I need something new, you know?
Exactly. Just something. Like, you can't have him be this big horror fan and then know nothing. But when he comes home and mom has invited Jerry in, first of all, we know mom wants Jerry. Like, she's obsessed. Like, she makes the comment early on, like, oh, with my luck, he's probably gay, because she's like, oh, he's hot. You know, like, she was interested. But she invites him in, and then Jerry makes the comment of, you know, I'll drop by whenever I feel like it, you know, like, he's clearly menacing her son. And then he turns and is like, with your lovely mother's permission, of course. And she's just like, oh, Jerry, fuck me now. Like, she is just ready to fucking throw down whether her kid is being menaced or not. She, like, mama wants that dick. Like, that's basically what I was getting out of that story. But and then we see it played out even further in the fucking club scene when Chris Sarandon walks in with all fucking swagger. And all I could think is, that's the kind of guy that would move into a suburban neighborhood and fuck everybody's mother. Like,
yes,
that is the guy that would seduce women in the 80s. Like, 100%. That's the kind of guy your mom got hot and bothered over.
Absolutely. He's like moving to the suburbs on purpose to go get all that like hot MILF leftovers.
Exactly. It cracks me up every time. But also, one other line I gotta say is, when after they have their little conversation with Jerry, and they all go their separate ways, and Evil starts to walk home. He goes, "Hey, where you going, Pencil Dick?" I love Evil's reaction because he goes, "Oh, home," like while grabbing his package.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh every fucking time. It's so dumb.
God, that actor, the way he plays Evil Ed is, again, it's like, ooh, he just overreacts to everything, and like his voice goes up a couple registers, and like, I know I keep using the word shrill, but it's such a perfect like descriptor for all three of these characters who spend the whole movie going, "Oh my God, guys!"
He reminds me of a real life Beavis.
Oh yes, yes, that's perfect.
But also, how the fuck does he survive? Because, like, we see him get staked. We see him turn back. Like, we see the scar on his head disappear. He goes back to normal. So, the evil has left his body. He's no longer a vampire, blah, blah, blah. But then at the end, we get the little stinger with the red glowing eyes and the, "Oh, Brewster, you're so cool." Or, "Oh, you're so cool, Brewster," or whatever he says. It's like, how did he survive? Like, that's always annoyed me.
Yeah, I took it as just being one of those like stupid little stingers that you get at the end of like 80s or 90s movies where it's always got to be like, "And now the killer is dead," or is he? And like they hardly ever make any sense, but they got to put some kind of a hook in it, and and then people are left wondering, "Oh, like how could he be alive? Like what's going on? Got to see the sequel." And then again, I haven't seen the sequel, but I'm gonna guess they did not resolve that storyline.
Not even close. So, but
oh God.
I have a couple last minute things to say, and then we'll jump right into it, I promise. But two things. There is, in the club scene, the bouncer says to Jerry Dandridge, "If you want chicken, man, you go someplace else." What? What does that mean? Every single time I see the movie, I'm like, okay, why? Like, it's the dude from Friday the 13th 3, the biker from Friday the 13th 3 is the bouncer in this.
Yeah.
And he pushes Jerry, goes, "If you want chicken, man, you go someplace else." And then Jerry kills him. And I'm like, who's having chicken? I'm confused. I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, I actually had to like pause and back it up because even though I had the closed captions on, I'm like, wait, what did he say? And like the best I can come up with is that he was thinking of like, you're here to pick up like a chick, like a bird, like the woman is a chicken, like, "Hey man, you want some chicken? Like go someplace else." Like he was telling him like, "Go pick up girls somewhere else, you old creeper," because she's clearly a teenager and you're not. Like I guess that's what he was trying to say, but it did not come across.
It was a very strange line of dialogue. But that always cracks me up. Also, Vampire Amy is pure fucking nightmare fuel. That prosthetic mouth, that giant mouth. First of all, the first time I saw this movie, I was terrified when I saw that scene. Like, I was afraid to turn the lights off. Like, she scared the shit out of me. And there was, I'm sure you remember, but in the 80s, like, card collecting was obviously big, but so were sticker albums. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of horror related sticker albums. Like there was Nightmare on Elm Street one. There was like a generalized, like, 80s horror, and it was like, monster movies and slashers and stuff. But I used to buy those sticker packs, and one of them, I'm cycling through them and I pull that card, and I just remember screaming and dropping the pack of cards because it was just Amy's creepy face looking back at me. Scared me so damn bad. Like, oh my God, that vampire face, just woof, fucking scary.
It's great. It's the best effect definitely in the movie. In a movie that has a really good mix of great special effects and like zipper up the back kind of cheesy effects that you still kind of go with anyway. Like it runs the gamut, and that is absolutely the best effect because it's obviously like bad makeup, but oh my God, like something about how bad it is makes it worse. It's horrifying.
It's the fact that the mouth never closes. It's just like this open, drooling maw, and her eyes are so fucking huge, and she just like runs at him, and it's like, that's horrifying. But speaking of the effects, the last thing I'm going to say about this movie is my favorite scene in the entire film, when Jerry first confronts Charlie in his bedroom. This whole sequence is so masterfully done. Not only is it just, again, Chris Sarandon destroying the scene, but from a story standpoint, I love the writing where it's like, he's this old vampire. He's done this dance 1,000 times. He gives Charlie a chance. He doesn't want, like, it almost seems like he doesn't want to shed more blood than he has to. Like, look, this is my nature. This is what I do. I know I'm a vampire. I got to kill to eat. Like, that's how it is. He's like, just forget about me, Charlie. Look the other way. Like, he's telling him, I'm not going to hurt you and your mom. Go about your lives. Leave me alone. I love that. I love that it's not just him menacing the kid. He's like, look, you have a chance to get away. And then Charlie's like, no, I'm going to fight back. And he grabs the cross. And, not then at that point, now it's like, well, you fucking fool. Now I got to kill you. But then we get the scene where Charlie stabs him in the hand. And again, it's a simple in-camera dissolve effect, but it's so good. You see the pencil clean through the hand. And I love the fact that when Jerry gets pissed, like when he loses his cool, that's when the beast mode comes out. And I've said this before about vampire movies. I don't like the, Interview with a Vampire style vampires. Like I can enjoy that movie and I can enjoy those types of stories, but they're not my favorite vampires. I don't want they're so pretty. They're just so sad and lonely and misunderstood. I don't want vampires that sparkle. I don't want vampires that are lovelorn. I want monsters. I want From Dusk Till Dawn. I want Nosferatu. I want fucking Barlow from Salem's Lot. And this gives me both. Chris Sarandon plays this, like I said, he plays the guy that's going to come into town and fuck your mom. Like, clearly he's a ladies' man. But the moment his mask slips, he's this fucking monster. And it's such a great effect. And he looks so cool. And I love it because, like, he's pissed when he gets stabbed in the hand. He's looking at Charlie like he's going to kill him. And then we hear mom and he realizes, like, fuck, I've been caught. So he, like, slowly reins it in and you see him turning back to normal. And he just looks at Charlie and, like, squeezes his hand and walks out. It's like, oh, it's so well done. It's such a great scene.
It is. I love it. And it's, like, tense, but at the same time, it's so believable. And what I took away from that, besides what you just described, like on the face of it, is I just kept thinking that Jerry was like, fuck, man, I just moved here. On like the first goddamn day, the neighbor kid is like getting all nosy and in my business. And like, now I got to move again. Like, fuck this. It's like
exactly.
You can't just kill him because that'll be like really suspicious, because Jerry was going around telling everybody that, oh, my neighbor's a vampire. And then he disappears, like, or is murdered. Like, of course, Jerry's going to be outed, or, maybe not as a vampire, but at least as the murderer. So it's like he had to be so exasperated. Like, God damn, I just moved here.
Right. This fucking kid.
So speaking of like, oh God, I just moved here. Like, let's talk a little bit about what we would do with Fright Night. Now, if it's clearly a horror movie, it's got some comedic elements, maybe not always on purpose, but
right.
It is a pretty scary movie at parts. So like you mentioned, some of the monster effects are really good, and it's even just some of the performances are eerie, but there is a lot of potential there for the same story to be played for laughs. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what would we do to change the plot or to add some new element that would take us in a different direction, so that this would be a more straightforward comedy rather than just trying to add the yucks to the existing story.
Well, my initial concept, like the thing that made me think of this, is that Charlie's wrong. Because again, if this were playing out in real life, like if you really thought your neighbor was a fucking vampire, again, as we discussed, like, vampires aren't real. So it's like, it would be a comedy of errors if here's this kid who really thinks his neighbor, who just like works third shift or is like a night owl type of person, like I am, because even when I'm off, I stay up all hours of the night. Like it's not rare to find me still awake at 6 a.m. On my night off. So there are people out there like that. So what if Jerry and Billy are just like fucking night owls, man? Like, they're not vampires. They're just, they're like antique dealers or, art collectors. They're up late. And here's Charlie, this horror obsessed teen that's like, the vampires. And he's so convinced that they're actually vampires, that he spends time trying to convince people they are, and then figures he's going to take matters into his own hands. But it's, it's like a fucking Scooby-Doo episode where it's like the monster isn't really a monster, it's a guy in a mask type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. There's definitely, some potential there. And here I'm sitting here pretending like, good idea, but like we didn't talk about this ahead of time when we were like deciding on the topic for the episode. But
Exactly.
That's exactly what we agreed on. Is okay, fine. So they're not actually vampires, or Jerry's not actually a vampire. Billy Cole isn't actually some kind of like ghoul / golem creature who is like the Renfield to the Jerry. They're just like regular dudes, right? Which that was the whole premise. And it's like, okay, well, where do we go from there? And listening to your Boogeyman's Closet episode today brought up a lot of comments that I also felt watching the movie, which is that there's a lot of like gay subtext and like sexual tension throughout the whole movie that isn't really explored that much, even within Charlie and Amy's relationship. Like, they don't give in to the sexual tension that like starts the whole movie. That's like the first scene in the movie is them making out and like maybe going to that next base. So yeah, I think it would be fun to kind of play up on that. Like, if they're not vampires, is Charlie just crazy because he's implying things, or he's seeing things that aren't actually there just because these guys have an unusual lifestyle for this boring suburban neighborhood? Or is there maybe like a different secret? If they're not vampires, maybe it's the 80s, maybe they're a gay couple just trying to like enjoy themselves in the suburbs, but like they're not out of the closet yet.
100%. And that's the thing. Like, I still say, like, in the actual movie, they were a gay couple. Chris Sarandon or Jerry Dandridge just brought ladies over to eat them because he's a vampire and he eats food.
Yeah, they're tasty. And
they were the cheeseburgers.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to one thing you mentioned before, it's like, he can't just kill the neighbor, and he doesn't want to just kill everybody like willy-nilly. Like, he was purposely killing people that he did not think would be missed, like, prostitutes and strangers and drifters or whatever, because you don't want to like, shit where you eat or eat where you shit, in this case.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I think it would be interesting if, we just put it right out there that yes, Billy and Jerry are in fact a gay couple, and they've moved from like the big city to this suburb, and I don't think they ever really mentioned what it is, but it would be the equivalent of like moving from Manhattan to like Connecticut. They buy some big, pretty, like, Victorian or Edwardian looking house in the suburbs that's been run down and like hasn't been taken care of, probably because like nobody in that neighborhood can take care of this like big Gothic mansion, but they've got a little bit of money, they've got what, like a dual income, no kids, like kind of thing. What do they call that? Like the dinks, right? Dual income, no kid relationship. And so they move in and they want to fix the place up, but they're probably out in Manhattan, but, moving to the suburbs again in the 80s, they're not going to just immediately advertise to the whole neighborhood that they're together. They got to like feel things out. But, right off the bat, Charlie, he's outing them, but like in the wrong way.
Exactly. So he's making everyone think like, hey, they're vampires, and they're just like, oh, thank God he doesn't know.
Oh, and see, that's a really good point. Like, yeah, that would be great if what if they like played into it? If they right? What if they think that Charlie is like spying on them and like acting silly or acting suspicious because they're like, oh shit, he's onto us. Like, he realizes that we're not just quote unquote roommates, like, and he's poking around, like, trying to like open the basement door or like look in the window, and they're like, oh crap, like he's onto us. He's gonna like tell the whole neighborhood, and then the housewife like gossip network will kick in. So as soon as he's like, oh my God, they're vampires, they're like, oh, that's perfect. Okay, yes, let's go with that.
Yes, let's play into that.
And so this is perfect because, of course, they would play right into it. Like, it helps with them with their cover. And so I'm trying to like think again, because I haven't seen the movie like a ton of times. So I'm trying to think back like which scene would be the best one for them to explain this. But I'm thinking it It would be something as simple as Jerry bought the house. He's the one who has money. He bought this big pretty house in the suburbs and he wants to like renovate it, but he doesn't know how to do that kind of thing. So he hires his friend Billy to come and renovate the house because that's what Billy does for a living. But it's just a long commute back and forth to the city, so it makes sense for Billy to just stay there while he's doing the work. So now they're just roommates. It's like it's a simple explanation, and of course then Charlie's going to be asking questions like, yeah, well, like, how come we only ever see you at night? Like, why are you up all night? And I think there's some simple explanations we can tie into the story.
What if Jerry's like a club owner?
Oh, like, that's pretty cool.
What if he owns like some kind of like hotspot nightclub in the city? So like, remember how like there's a couple scenes where he's like, oh, not tonight, I'll be out of town. So like maybe like he kind of like he runs the joint, but he doesn't like he's not always there every night. But he is up at night because again, it's a late nightclub. So it's like any trouble he's going to be dealing with is going to be at night.
Oh yeah, see, that's perfect, right? Yeah, exactly. He's got this, like you mentioned, this like third shift kind of a job, because he's the nightlife is literally his his life, his livelihood. So yeah, this makes perfect sense. He would be gone a lot at night, but Billy would be there during the day as he is. People see him in broad daylight because he doesn't have that lifestyle. Instead, he's a contractor or a renovator. Maybe he specializes in fixing up and flipping old houses. So he's the one who's like doing all the work on the house. And then, when he's done for the day, Jerry's coming home, and, it's perfectly innocent on the surface. But of course, the reality is, yes, those things are true. Jerry does own a club, and he's an antique collector, which seems kind of on the nose for like a rich gay guy. But right. Yeah, but he's with Billy, and yeah, Billy, that's what he does. He likes to fix up old houses. So yeah, that's what they do. They found this like pretty mansion in the suburbs. They got it for a steal, and now it's like their new project. And they wanted to get away from like the hustle and bustle and like the madness of the city because maybe they're getting a little bit older or whatever.
Well, and we can also explain away, like you had mentioned the antique collector. Maybe it's not just antiques. Maybe it's, antiques and memorabilia, because we have the scene where in the actual movie where Jerry talks to Evil Ed, and he's like, he talks about what a big fan he is of Peter Vincent. And he talks about how like, I think you and I have a lot in common being big horror fans and such. Like, what if he's also a memorabilia collector, and the coffin we see them bringing in the beginning of the film is literally a film prop from an old vampire movie that Jerry is obsessed with, which is also why he's only lifting it with one hand, because it's made out of like fucking balsa wood, because it's a prop.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I love that. That's a perfect explanation. But of course, to Charlie, it would seem crazy. Like, it's this big, creepy coffin. He's carrying it with one hand, and they take it into the basement at night. And it's like, yes, to a teenager in high school, kind of a dumb one at that, because, he did fail his trig exam. All right. So, yeah, he's just going to jump to conclusions as he does. And, I think we can kind of like explain away lots of things, even like having like ladies come to the house, like that one, the one woman who comes that, Charlie like kind of ogles, that is the sex worker. But, and it could be just that, like, yes, she's a sex worker, but maybe he was going to like hire her to, be a bartender, or, maybe he has plans to like open up some kind of a business here in town. He's like interviewing people, or hell, maybe the club he owns is like, topless. And so he's like doing, having ladies come over and have like, what do you call them? Like auditions or tryouts or whatever. Like, you can explain these things away that, why would this gay couple have all these girls come over? But again, to Charlie, it looks like, oh, he's like seducing young women and like eating them.
Right. Well, yeah. And we could even have like, maybe one was hired to like, help them clean or something. Like, it was literally like a cleaning service. Maybe the one that Charlie sees Jerry making out with, maybe in this version of the film, he doesn't see that. He just sees the woman come over, and hears the scream, and we can explain away the scream. Like, maybe she accidentally like dropped something, like dropped one of the antiques, something, like freaked out because like, oh no, I screwed up my job. Like, that type of a, like, I'm going to get fired. Like, that was the scream, not the fact that she was being murdered, but to Charlie with the overactive imagination, like, oh my God, she's dead. And he immediately runs away from the window, and he doesn't see what plays out where Jerry is like on the porch talking to her, being like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. These things happen. Like, he's trying to like calm her down. Like, it's okay. It was just a vase. It's not anything to worry about.
Right.
But Charlie's already off to the races. Like, the vampires.
Yeah, and like the scene also, close to the beginning where you see Billy put like a big garbage bag in the back of his Jeep, and Charlie thinks it's like a body wrapped in plastic, and then you see Jerry walk over, eating an apple that he like throws in the grass for some reason, but then he also throws Billy a purse, and there's that weird effect where he like catches it backwards, and it's strange, but it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
I
you
agree.
forgot something, and it's like, to Charlie, he's like, oh no, it's like that lady's purse. Like, they killed her and she's like wrapped up in the plastic in the back of the Jeep, that's what it looks like to him. But the reality is like, no, it was just like an old rug, that some dusty, gross old rug with like rat shit on it that he wrapped up in plastic and threw in the back of the Jeep, and then Jerry's like, it's as simple as, oh, the cleaning person who was here earlier left without her purse. Can you drop this off on your way to the dump, or whatever? Like, but Charlie's like, oh no, they murdered that woman and they're gonna like, bury her with her purse to get rid of the evidence.
Or it could even be something as simple as like the stuff that they're getting rid of, like you said, a rolled up rug. They restore houses. They bought this house that's been on the market forever. Maybe it was like filled with old crap, like old furniture and shit down in the basement, and they're just like getting rid of stuff, and like maybe something fell out of one of the bags, and Jerry's just like, hey, you forgot this, and like throw it. It's literally as simple as this gaudy purse was left in the house and we're getting rid of it because it's gaudy.
Yeah,
But
and Billy'd be like, ew, sequins, gross.
right, exactly. And I love, like, we got to explain away the fact that they're painting the windows black for the basement. That's very simple. One of the things that people always complain about, especially memorabilia collectors, is sun damage. So if the basement is turned into like the collector room where Jerry has all of his like movie props and memorabilia and framed posters and all that, they're not going to want any sunlight damaging it. So they paint out and cover up all the windows down there, and he's slowly turning it into literally his man cave. Like, that's
yeah, actually it would be really funny if like the big reveal of like the coffin room is that like he's such a big fan of Peter Vincent and Fright Night Theater that he has like a whole like Peter Vincent like little corner where he's got like a coffin and like props from the movies and like maybe pieces of a set from the TV show, and yeah, but it's all very controlled with like lighting and like controlled, like temperature controlled, like a little museum. So yeah, you don't want to have just random sunlight or just random people like spying on your like basement shrine / man cave.
right. Plus, let's be honest, in the 80s, it wasn't cool to be a nerd. Those of us that grew up as nerds remember, it wasn't cool to be a nerd. If you're a gay nerd, you're going to want to keep that under wraps. So, he's like, hey, you know what, get the fuck out of my business, boy.
Yeah, that's it, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, they even pick on Evil Ed for being into that kind of stuff, because even though Charlie likes watching those like old scary movies, like Evil Ed's the guy who's like who knows all the lore and the stories, and like he's clearly like the dork that they make fun of in the movie because he's like the pop culture guy. So yeah, it would make sense that Jerry is secretly really into that kind, like those old Hammer films and stuff like that. Like he loves old black and white Universal monster movies. Like that's his whole vibe, which is why he likes big creepy gothic houses full of antiques, because it's like Dracula's castle.
Right. I think this makes perfect fucking sense. And like, I know we're running long, so I think what we need to do is have a point in the film where it's going to diverge into our improv. I think we open the film the same way the movie opens. Like, we see Charlie and Amy making out. We see Peter Vincent on the TV. So we introduce all those characters. We see the people moving in next door. We see the scene with Jerry and Billy carrying in the coffin, which kickstarts Charlie going, oh my God, they're vampires. We do the same thing where, like you said, the woman, the sex worker comes over to the house. Charlie sees her and is like, oh, like something's going on. We can even have the mom make the comment of like, oh, with my luck, they're probably gay. And Charlie's like, I don't think so. Like, giving the mom hope. But realistically, like we would insert a scene where we see Jerry interviewing her, like in a home office, being like, so yeah, I mean, it's a little, maybe it's a little awkward, but there is dancing that happens at the club, and it is topless. Like, you will be wearing, like tassels or covers or something. Like, he can kind of like try to play it up a little bit. But we see part of this interview, so we know, like, okay, Charlie's dead wrong. Like, this is him interviewing a woman for a job. So we could see, just like in the original movie, we see right away that he's a vampire. In this one, we're going to see right away he's not a vampire, and that Charlie is just fucking insane.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Yeah, we can kind of have like the same kind of beats, but yeah, insert these little scenes where, like, when Charlie goes home and, like, Billy closes the door, Jerry's there and he's like, oh, is he gone? Like this like this crazy kid, like, he's gonna tell the whole neighborhood about us, until they realize that he thinks that they're all vampires, which maybe comes out during the scene where Charlie calls the cops and goes to the house with, like, the homicide lieutenant, and they're talking to Billy, and Billy thinks the whole thing is hilarious, like, we're vampires, like, yeah, Charlie, like, what's in the basement, a coffin? It's like, but in the real movie he's being sarcastic. In this movie he's, like, really just, like, trying not to laugh at how silly this is. Like, the fucking teenage kid from next door legitimately brought a cop here to tell them that we're vampires. Like, oh my god, that is so hilariously cringy.
Exactly.
But of course, as soon as he leaves, Billy's going to tell Jerry about it, and they're going to be like, "Oh, this is perfect." We just got to lean right into this. They were afraid about being outed as gay. Now they just have to, like, lean into this, and they're essentially going to, like, gaslight this kid from next door, by convincing him that they really are vampires. So he keeps going along with it, and this is their way of, like, hiding out in suburbia.
I fucking love it. But the best part is, like, this is going to go horribly wrong for them, because they're convincing a very unhinged person
yes
that they're vampires.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. Like, yeah, this is definitely got to blow out of control, because we've seen how, again, they just overreact to everything. Like, Charlie and Amy and Evil, they overreact to everything. So eventually, they're going to overreact in, like, the worst possible way. And but again, I think we can kind of have the movie kind of be the same, and eventually at some point, and I know I'm kind of, like, rushing through a little bit, only because I think that people kind of get the point, and we've belabored it enough. But at some point, Charlie's going to go to Peter Vincent, who is this actor on a TV show who hosts, like, a horror anthology show, who himself used to be an actor who played a vampire killer, who, by the way, in that one scene, he's holding the stake backwards, which I thought was hilarious.
I love that. I love that scene. Yes.
But, like, Charlie is convinced that this is real. Like, he's convinced the neighbors are vampires, so the vampire hunter on TV must be real, right? And he literally goes to this actor and is like, hey, can you help me, like, come kill the vampires who moved in next door to me? Peter Vincent's got to think that this kid is unhinged. Like, I'm an actor.
That was a role that I played on television.
Exactly. But then, like, you go the next time that they try to enlist Peter, which is when Amy and Evil, go to his office. Well, you find out before that, like, the TV show got canceled, he got fired, and then Amy and Evil go to his house, and they literally, like, bribe him. They mention they have some money, and he, like, perks right up, like, how much, And again, it's because he's an actor and he, like, wants to get paid. So he's like, oh, you have $500? Like, I can play the role once again. And then he literally goes to the house and, like, wants to do, like, the vampire test, but he thinks he's playing a role. He thinks that, like, this weird kid's girlfriend hired him to, like, play the kid's hero because, there's some kind of, like, gift for her boyfriend or something. You know what I mean?
Yes. Maybe he even has, like, because again, now we're gonna have to reverse this, so it'll be one of those things where the Jerry and Billy, obviously they're in on it, and they're like, no, you're supposed to convince him that we are vampires,
Mm-hmm.
and like, so we're gonna do the thing where it's like, Amy's trying to convince or trying to get Peter to do the vampire test, and maybe Billy and Jerry are leaning into the whole we are vampires thing. So the idea is that they're gonna have to try to end it by convincing Charlie, like, oh shit, they are really vampires. So maybe we could do something like, how he sees and there's no reflection, and that's where Peter is like, oh shit, it's real. maybe we could do something like it's a prop mirror, like it's not an actual mirror, so there's no reflection in anybody, but we see like Charlie is just like, oh God, like they're really vampires.
Yeah. Well, and Peter Vincent, he even mentioned that it's a prop from like Orgy of the Damned, or like one of these like
Right.
silly B movies he used to do. I mean, and you can make a mirror like that. All you have to do is like half of it's a mirror and the other half of it is just like, greased or frosted glass. So it looks like a mirror, but you're only going to get a reflection on one side. Like that they do that, and like,
Exactly.
so it would be perfect. It's literally a movie prop that he's using to convince Charlie. And for some reason, Peter is just confused because he thinks that like he was hired to do this on purpose. Like his, the weird kid's girlfriend hired me to do this, so he's gonna totally go along with it. But at some point, you have to realize, like, or Peter should realize that, wait, maybe this has gone too far.
Right. So yeah, so Amy and Evil go to Peter Vincent to like hire him, just like in the movie, hire him to prove to Charlie that Jerry and Billy are not vampires, not creatures of the night. So just like in the film, Peter calls Jerry and he's like, hey, we're going to do this vampire test, yada, yada, yada. Are you okay with drinking, tap water? We're going to say it's holy water. And he's like going on through all these things. But yeah, we could have Jerry be like, well, hold up. We don't want to convince him that we're not vampires. We kind of want this charade to keep on going. And, Peter's going to be like, why? And I'm like, yeah, never mind. We have our reasons. Like, it's
Right.
we're having fun with this. He could even say, like, how much is his little girlfriend paying you? And, have him be like, we could see the view from like Jerry's point of view. For he's like 500. Okay, how about 2,000? He's like, I'll give you 2,000. Do your little vampire test, play along, but at the very end, do something to make it seem like maybe, just maybe, you're not convinced. So that's where we could have. We gets off the phone and have him talking to Evil and be like, it's just going to be regular tap water, this, that, and the other. And he's like, and he goes, I have this wonderful little mirror from Orgy of the Damned. And he could talk about how he used it to prove, who was a vampire and who wasn't a vampire. But it's a prop mirror. So one side is reflective, the other side isn't, like we discussed. So that's going to be his ace in the hole to make it look like, oh no, maybe they really are vampires. So we do the whole thing. We go through just like in the movie. They all come to the house. They all show up. Charlie is going there with the intent of like, yeah, we're going to prove that they're really vampires, while everyone else is just like, no, we're not, except for Peter, who's playing along. So just like how the movie played out, everything happens as is. Charlie pulls out the cross and he's like, I'll protect you with this. And, Billy and Jerry are just kind of smiling. And Jerry backs up a little like, ooh, spooky, playing into it. And then we have that moment at the end where Peter opens up the mirror and pretends to not see Jerry, and have Charlie be like, well, what did you see? What happened? He's like, nothing. Let's go. It's time for us to leave, And they run out. Maybe he could play it up. Like when he gets in the car, he's like, what did you see, Peter? You saw something. He's like, he cast no reflection in my mirror, does that whole thing. And he's like, see, they're vampires. And he's like, I gotta go. And he leaves. Yeah. So now it's like, we play it up just like it happened in the movie, but with the caveat that Peter was in on the joke.
Yeah, that's perfect. Just a little detail I think would be fun if, like, when Peter and Jerry are talking on the phone, and Jerry asks him, well, how much did the little girlfriend pay you? Have Peter be like, $1,000. It was $1,000. And that's why Jerry's like, I'll give you $2,000, because Peter.
Perfect.
He's all about getting paid, right? Exactly. So
forever the con man.
Exactly. Okay, so right after this, in the movie, they had help me to remember. They're walking home, right? They're walking home,
yes.
And kind of when I say they, I mean Charlie and Evil and Amy. They're walking home and they're kind of arguing. And at a certain point, Evil gets to this like dark alleyway. He wants to go down the alleyway, and Charlie doesn't want to. It's not safe. And Evil's like, what he says something like, you may be, scared of everything, but I'm not, or you may be chicken shit, but I'm not.
Yep.
And
that's exactly it.
So he goes down the alleyway, and then Jerry comes and hunts him through the alleyway, and then bites him and turns into a vampire. So obviously that isn't going to happen. But I think at this point, like, we need to start ramping up the delusional mania that Charlie has. Like, he was just convinced that his neighbors were vampires. This famous vampire killer, tried to prove that they weren't, but now, he's in doubt, like something went wrong. So obviously they're vampires, and, Evil takes off or something. That maybe they have like a little argument or something, because I feel like we kind of need to get Evil either off the table, or we need to get to the next level of Charlie's insanity here.
Well, I think this is where we play it up. Like, we could actually have an argument. So this is where we're going to diverge from the original film. So we could have an argument where we do the same thing. Like, Evil wants to go down the creepy alleyway, and he's like, no, let's just ask him for trouble. And he's like, you may be chicken shit, but I'm not. And then have him like smirk at Charlie and start walking down the alley, and Charlie be like, "What's wrong with you, Evil? Like, did they get to you too?" And like have him like start almost like Snap here, where he chases after Evil into the alleyway and starts like arguing with him, and have Evil be like, "Oh yeah, Brewster, I'm a fucking vampire," like laughing it up. And because Charlie's fucking out of it, he's like, "You are, aren't you? Why else would you know so much about vampires? Why else would people call you evil? You're a fucking vampire." Like, completely ignoring the fact that he's seen Evil in the daylight multiple times.
I know. And he should say something like, did they turn you? Like, when did they turn you? Or, oh no, you've been a vampire all along, haven't you?
Right. And have you be like, "What the fuck, Brewster? What's wrong with you?" And we could have Charlie literally pull a wooden stake out of his jacket, because remember, he was going over there prepared. He had crosses and stakes and everything. So he pulls out a wooden stake and he's like, "Brewster, what the fuck?" And he literally stakes Evil to death in the alleyway.
Oh shit.
Evil's obviously going to scream. Amy's going to see this. She's going to see Charlie murdering Evil and fucking run away in terror, because it's like, holy shit, her boyfriend just murdered their friend.
Right. Yeah. So we already had a scene early in the movie where we already mentioned where Charlie tries to convince the cops that his neighbors are vampires. The cop thinks he's crazy. He's like, "Don't ever come back here." Charlie told this story to Amy. Amy didn't want him to go to the cops in the first place. So this is a good opportunity for, like, maybe Amy. In the real world, she would run to the police, like, "Oh my God, my boyfriend just like murdered somebody." But maybe instead she goes back to Peter Vincent's house. Like, maybe she gets there as he's like getting out of the car. Like, she ran frantic and screaming like the whole way there. And she's like, "Oh my God, Charlie just like killed Evil. I can't believe it. Like, we were supposed to convince him they weren't vampires. Like, oh, like this is so horrible." And then Peter's like, "Oh my God, like what happened?" Like, he's just like, "Oh shit, like that backfired," And
right.
And so maybe he calls, maybe they go in the house, and, he's calming down Amy, and he calls up Jerry and tells him exactly that. He's like, "Look, I don't know what your whole plan was to have this kid be convinced that you guys were vampires, but it completely backfired on you, because I think he might have just hurt somebody." And, maybe Jerry's like, "Oh shit, like you better get over here right away. Like,
we need to get our story straight."
Yes, that's it. Yeah, exactly. He's like, you were in on this too, so get over here so we can get our story straight before someone calls the cops. And then we cut back over to Jerry and Billy's house. Peter rushes back over there and goes into the house like, "Oh, like, oh my God, like have you seen Charlie? Has he been here? Like, what's going on?" Right at that moment, it's like boom, Charlie like kicks in the front door, and he's all like decked out in like wooden stakes and a hammer, like fucking Rambo, like ready to kill some fools.
And see, I'm sorry, when he kicks in the door, we have to have Peter literally do like the hands up shake, like the double fist up in the air shaking, like scream, like total, like just complete terror moment.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. And I'm picturing, Billy, and not to press stereotypes too much, but I feel like Billy's who's gonna take action. He's gonna run over to the door and be like, "Charlie, like what the hell, man? Get the hell out of here!" And maybe Charlie just like he goes to like stab him. Billy jumps out of the way, but he gets like cut really bad, or he gets like maybe kind of half staked in the shoulder, and like he's starting to bleed, and they're like, "Oh, what the fuck, like this is for real." Like, Charlie has lost it, like his eyes are ablaze, like with this mania. So he's clearly dangerous. So instead of trying to confront him that way, like they're gonna run. And now we can have this cool scene where you have these like three guys who like run to hide in this big mansion, and here comes Charlie. Now he's the vampire killer.
I love it. It would be, I'm picturing, and I know we're not going to do this, but I'm picturing immediately Scooby-Doo, like where you cue up some weird like 60s band, and they're just like running through the mansion, like zoinks, yo, just take it off. But I don't know if we might want to kill Billy. Like, imagine how fucked up it would be if like Billy goes over, he's like, okay, this has gone far enough. He's like, Charlie, we're not vampires, and have him literally like stab him in the chest, like, die, creature of the night. And
Oh
just,
shit.
like, fucking just literally pounding a stake into his chest right in front of Peter and Jerry, who were completely shocked, like, holy shit, he's crazy. And then, Charlie looks at him, he's like, I'm not going to let you murder anyone else in my town, and like runs at him holding a stake up. And this is when Jerry and Peter like run the fuck away. Like, holy shit, get out of here.
Oh fuck yeah, that just ramped up like really steeply. That's awesome. I love that. Like Charlie is just like gone completely off the deep end. Yeah, and he's chasing these guys through the house. Yeah, I mean like it's definitely like a Scooby-Doo kind of moment. But yeah, it should definitely be this sequence where Charlie's chasing them, and it's like they run into a room, and maybe like Peter slams the door in Charlie's face, and then at some point like one of them has to like climb out a window to get on the balcony, and Charlie goes the other way, and it's like now they're like on the balcony railing, and it's like raining for some reason out of nowhere.
Well, third act rainstorm, you gotta have it.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, because we're going a little bit long, how I'm picturing this ending is, they end up down in the basement, which Charlie is convinced is like, the coffin room. Like, maybe he's lost track of Peter and Jerry, and now he's like, oh, they must be in the basement. They've gone down there. They've got all of their occult relics and weapons or whatever is down there. Or maybe he's just like, oh, the sun's coming up. Jerry must be, wanting to get into his coffin and, whatever. So they go down in the basement, and maybe Peter's hiding down there, and Charlie sees him and goes to like attack him, and Peter's holding him back, and then you just hear Jerry's voice like yell out Charlie, whatever, kind of snap Charlie to his attention for a moment while he's like stake in midair. Jerry turns on all the lights, and then you see this really brightly lit like man cave, like we talked about, where it's like all fluorescent lights, and there's like glass cases. It's lit up like a big white room, and it's all full of like memorabilia from the Fright Night TV show, stuff that Charlie would recognize. Like, here's the little shrine to Peter Vincent that Jerry's finally going to snap him to his senses. Like, what the hell, Charlie? We're not vampires. Like, we were just messing with you. We didn't want you to tell the whole neighborhood that you were gay, but you like, killed my husband upstairs, or, whatever. And I think it'd be interesting if Peter kind of like, sees like, oh shit, like look at all this stuff. Like, this is, because he's really egotistical. Like, let's not forget that part,
Right.
But I think Jerry's gonna like, calm Charlie down for a second, appeal to, his logic and his like, his better nature of like, Charlie, like it was all, like a prank. It was a ruse. Like, I'm sorry for fooling you, but we're not really vampires. Like we just, thought that you were like a silly kid next door, and we were like having a little bit of fun with you, and Charlie's like, oh my God, I can't believe all this time you were a vampire right under my nose. And he like fucking goes to stake him,
Well,
I don't know if he
real
should
quick.
kill him or not. I just think it would be a fun like little moment.
Yeah, no, I'm loving this with the whole chase through the house and all that. We could have like, Peter throwing a vase at Charlie, or like them slamming. Like, we could have all sorts of crazy shit happening throughout the chase, and eventually Peter and Jerry end up down in the basement, like, because maybe that's like, he's like, come on, like almost like a panic room type of thing. Like, it's got a big lock on the door, so they run down to the basement. But I love this idea of Peter following Jerry into the basement and having him see all of the memorabilia, like you said, and like, oh my, like that. But then have him see like this curtained area, like with the like two big velvet curtains like pulled back and candelabras and all that. And there's a big coffin on like a pedestal there, and have him look at Jerry and be like, you have a coffin? The boy thinks you're a vampire, and you have a coffin in your basement, and that's where we're hiding? Like, and have him just be like, I'm a fan. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, don't you recognize it? It's the coffin of the Vampire King from Fangs of the Blood Brood,
So yeah, we can have that little back and forth moment, but then we have, Charlie is beating down the door, and have him be like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then like this, we have the confrontation moment, just like you said, where he comes in and Jerry's like, Charlie, wait. It's like, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to fool you, but this has gone too far. He's like, you killed my husband, you killed your friend. Like, this is crazy. Like, we're not actually vampires. Vampires aren't real. And we could have like Peter kind of like watching the whole time, like not knowing what to say. And then be like, I'm so sorry we messed with you, Charlie. Like, we thought it was just harmless fun. Really, we're gay, and it's not accepted. So we wanted to keep you out of our business. And he goes, and now my husband's dead. And he's like going on like this very heartfelt rant of just like, holy shit, none of this should have ever happened. And have Charlie looking at him and be like, your lies won't convince me, vampire. I see your coffin. And have him like go to stake Jerry. And then have Peter save the day. Like maybe he grabs one of the big like candlesticks and clonks Charlie over the head, like clonk, knocks him out. Have Charlie's like, blah, 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 blah. Like he hits the ground. So like we see that scene, and then we cut to the next scene where the cops are there. Charlie's being led away in a paddy wagon and handcuffs. The mom's there freaking out, like, oh my God, my boy, all that. And so we get the statements. Jerry's obviously mourning his husband. He's talking to, the coroner and all that. We see it's just starting to be done. And he's given his statement to the police. And he's like, officers, I've been awake a very long time and I'm a very old man. Can I please go? Yeah, sir. Thank you for your statement. You're like, I'm sorry. We'll be in touch. And we see Peter leave. So now we see him come into his apartment. And this was your idea. We talked for a moment off air. So why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, so Peter walks into his apartment, and he's like, you see him like hang up the keys and take off his coat, and he's like sighing, like, oh, like, what a night, and we just think that he's gonna, sit and, have sit and reflect on like what a crazy day it was. But, he flips on the light, and oh shit, he's got Amy tied up on a chair in his living room because, like, don't forget, like, she ran off screaming to go get help from Peter, but then she disappeared at that point. We didn't have her go back to the house with, Peter and to confront Charlie. And so, she's tied up with like a gag in her mouth and doing that thing, like, like trying to like scream and like, like begging him to like let her go. And she's like all sweaty and scared. And then I'm not good at like the delicious monologues, but we have to have, Peter say something, like, isn't it funny? So ironic. All this time, your boyfriend was convinced that his neighbors, were, blood-sucking vampires. Like, oh, that's so silly. Like out of a movie. It's like what everyone doesn't realize is that, vampires don't really drink blood. They eat the whole victim. And then like his fucking face opens up and it's that big, disgusting mouth that like Amy would have in the real movie, but we sacrificed that for Peter having this giant maw full of teeth. And then he just like rushes at her, mouth wide open, cut to black.
And then, of course, we hear the cackling, Fright Night! And then the credits roll.
Yeah, I think we got there eventually. Like it took a really long time, a lot of like rambling and having some fun with the real movie, and man, I think we got there eventually. That would be a really fun like little twist ending. That it was Peter who really was a vampire. The guy pretending to be a vampire killer was really a vampire all along, and maybe he was the one who was like killing the sex worker or whatever that they heard about like on the police band.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. So yeah, no, I like this. It's like I said, it's definitely hard to improv or change up a movie that we already really like. I mean, we kind of ran into that with Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, because like the movie itself is just kind of a fun, weird 90s movie, and it's like, how do we change that up? So sometimes you just gotta play with the existing structure for a bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think we had some fun with it. We took a pretty basic concept that honestly I wasn't sure we could get a whole episode out of. I was thinking that maybe, this could be like a shorter clip and maybe some other show, because it's just like, oh yeah, like, they weren't vampires. But I think there was enough there, and we just had to talk through it for a little while. But yeah, I think this is a lot of fun. It definitely diverges a lot because in the real movie's kind of long. And I think that we're going to cut like a good 30 minutes out of the finale, just by of getting to the point after the vampire test and like dark alley scenes.
Right, we're not going to have the whole club sequence, and the whole final showdown is going to be more Scooby-Doo and less, Final Stand type thing.
Yeah. So definitely making some big changes, and I definitely don't think that we can like improve, such a great movie. Like, I mean, how do you improve that? Like, to your point, we just got to do something totally different, and I think this is kind of fun. I think we got there eventually.
Yeah, we were just having fun with the property because it's something we both actually like. Like, the movie is a good movie. So
yeah, absolutely.
We're not improving it at all. We're just playing with it.
Yeah, I think if we're improving anything, it's the depiction of gay characters in a horror or a comedy in the 80s, because I was thinking more about like vampire movies, and another one occurred to me while we were talking through this, which is I'm a big fan, or at least I was a big fan of Once Bitten, right? From
Hmm.
1985. It was actually the first movie I ever saw Jim Carrey in,
Yep.
which is it's a really really raunchy like teen comedy, really raunchy, about a guy who meets a vampire, and it's supposed to be funny, and I think it is. And I used to love watching that movie as a kid as well, but it's extremely problematic in a lot
Oh,
of ways.
absolutely. And I'm the same way. Like, I loved it as a kid. I watched it all the time because it was always on HBO. It was one of those filler movies that they
Hmm.
put on all the fucking time. And I had it taped from HBO as well. It's funny, it's silly, but watching it as an adult, it's like Revenge of the Nerds. I loved
Hmm.
Revenge of the Nerds as a kid. Watching it as an adult, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, they're criminals. Like, they're awful people.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
Once Bitten is the same way. It's like, oh my God, there's just so much really rampant homophobia in this film.
Yeah, like there's a whole subplot where Jim Carrey's character, his two best friends, at one point end up having people think that they are gay, and it's like the worst thing that could have happened to them. It is the end of their lives. They are
Yep.
mortified that anybody would possibly think that they're gay, as if that is a horrible, horrible thing to have happen to you. It's like a sentence for them, and it's like, ah, geez, guys, like it's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, again, we grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like, that's kind of how people acted back then. Like, oh, I'm not gay. Like, just it was like the worst thing you could be accused of. Whereas, like, having been someone that has been accused of it multiple times at work, I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a damn.
Yeah, I think now especially, but yeah, it would be definitely interesting if the type of movie that we just improved were to come out at that time, because we definitely present these two characters in a much more positive light, even though they themselves are afraid of being outed in their new neighborhood, and they definitely take it too far by gaslighting the dumbass neighbor kids. So it's not
Right.
it's not exactly like the best message, but definitely better than a lot of the films that were coming out at the time.
Well, and it's also the point of the story ends up being like, be careful because you could create your own monster.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to, I think, wrap this up. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm glad we had a chance to do this. I had a lot of fun just talking about the movie and about some other properties. Like, even though we kind of stumbled a little bit through the improv and tried to figure out how to make it work. This was really fun, and I still had a good time, with this episode. Sometimes they're kind of like this. I remember our 100% More Christian Slater episode was kind of similar in that it was like we were explaining a concept of how we would change a movie or a character without really like walking through everything beat by beat. And I think this one
Mhm.
is kind of the same way, which I'm still perfectly happy with. This was a ton of fun.
Oh
But
yeah. But I mean, this is baked into the original DNA of the show. I mean, we did that with our Police Academy episode,
that's
and
true.
that was like episode what, 2 or 3? Like, that was early on.
Yeah, the
So
second one.
second one, yeah. So I mean, and that's the thing. Like, so sometimes it's going to be a beat by beat, new telling of a story. Sometimes it's going to be a completely new story where we go through every step of the way. And other times it's going to be like this, where we're going to be like, all right, you guys remember this movie, right? Now it's the movie that we talked about, but here's where it's going to change. Like, it's one of the many styles of the show.
Yeah. I definitely would prefer to have Charlie as this like completely like unhinged maniac rather than like the annoying whiner that we get in the real movie.
Completely agree.
Yes, and definitely happy to kill Evil Ed earlier on. Less scenes with Evil Ed.
Ugh, yeah, tell me about it. That guy's annoying as hell.
I know, right? Oh man. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening to us for this long. Thanks for tuning in to the Raise by Rentals program once again. You can find us online at raisebyrentals.com. As always, at Raise by Rentals on all the socials. Definitely check out radpantheon.com for a whole super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, all sorts of creative people spreading the word about rad stuff. So if you like this show, there's a really good chance that you'll dig, one or maybe all of the other projects at radpantheon.com. What about you, Mike? What do you got going on?
Well, the Boogeyman's Closet is back by the time you listen to this. We are doing Halloween month because we have to, because it's spooky season. And we are doing the next 4 Halloween movies in the franchise that we haven't covered yet, which is 5, 6, 7, and 8. So some real fucking winners, but we're coming back with a bang. Having a lot of fun getting back into that. There was a lot of ups and downs on how the show was going to return, how things were going to go. We were able to work out our scheduling issues and get back on track. So it'll come back almost exactly as it was, with a few minor tweaks here and there. But so definitely check out the Boogeyman's Closet on all of the socials and Podbean and wherever you can find your podcasts.
Awesome. I am absolutely looking forward to getting a chance to listen to that. And again, by the time this comes out, I will have listened to it. So, hey, Mike, that was awesome. I'm so glad you came back.
Yay! Thank you.
And don't forget to tune in to Count Creepyhead's Saturday Morning Monster Mash, the other podcast that you do with Josh Hibbard and Michael May, where you guys are, a couple of man-children that bitch about pop culture and talk about toys? Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And lots of really weird Muppet talk, including it won't be our most recent episode by the time you hear this, but we had a conversation about which one of the Jabba the Hutt band members you'd want to fuck. So check that episode out. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was. That's not even the most ridiculous thing that happens on that show. Actually, the fact that Kermit the Frog and Werner Herzog are recurring characters is you have to listen to it. You have to listen to it to believe it. Anyway, thanks again for tuning into the Raise by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, visit us on those socials, drop us a line, leave us a comment, leave a podcast rating. Let us know what we should improve next time. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes.
Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon Network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
Years ago, FilmSec covered Fright Night, and they were talking about they do the same thing that I do on the Boogeyman's Closet, where they talk about people's IMDb, and obviously Evil was a gay porn star, and that's a big thing in his IMDb. But one of the guys talks about Evil in porn, and they're like, oh, with that voice, like, can you picture, like, hey, what are you doing back there? And I fucking lost it, because it's like all I could picture was Evil looking over his shoulder being like, hey, what are you doing? And every time he talks in that movie, all I can hear is FilmSec talking about that. It cracks me up.